I don't know when I started noticing the little details. Maybe it was the way her hand lingered a second too long on the coffee counter, fingertips tracing the wood as if she was stalling. Or maybe it was how she always remembered my order before I could even open my mouth. Black coffee, 1 sugar, no cream. She wasn't a stranger. That would have been easier. She was my friend's mom. That unspoken label was the anchor tied to every glance. Every accidental smile I found myself holding too long. The coffee shop wasn't special. It sat on the corner of Main, wedged between a dry cleaner's and a bookstore that only seemed to sell things nobody bought. The air smelled faintly burnt, like the beans had been sitting too long, but it was the only place that opened before sunrise. I came here most mornings, books spread out, pretending to study, but mostly staring at the same line of text for 20 minutes at a time. She came too, sometimes before work, sometimes after errands. Always alone. Our conversation started with a nod, then a polite smile, then an easy joke about the barista's habit of forgetting names. And then it became normal. Too normal. She'd stop by my table sometimes, setting her paper cup down and asking, "Big exam coming up?" in that light, practiced tone of hers. I'd shrug, trying to look productive. That always made her laugh, quiet and close to herself, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. The strange thing is, she never felt like someone else's mom when we talked. Not to me. I'd catch myself noticing her bracelets, the way they slid up her wrist when she reached for her cup, or how she smoothed the crease of her sleeve before sitting down, like she was aware of being watched even if she never looked at me directly. I never said anything, but my eyes lingered. Too long. Loneliness makes you careful. It's not loud, not desperate. It just rearranges your days in small ways. Like walking the long way to class just in case you might pass by the coffee shop. Or keeping your phone face down because you know no one's texting and you don't want to see the silence confirmed. Or holding a sentence too long in your mouth because saying it might make it real. That was me. Careful. Too careful. One morning, she slid into the seat across from me without asking. Her hair was still damp from a shower, and she smelled faintly of clean soap mixed with coffee steam. She tapped her finger against my untouched mug. "Cold already," she said. I nodded. Got distracted. Her eyes flicked to the open book in front of me. Or pretending again. I tried not to smile, but it slipped out anyway. She noticed. She always noticed. We sat there longer than we should have, talking about nothing. Weather, errands, the bookstore next door. She teased me for folding my napkin into a crooked triangle, and I teased her back for always stirring her coffee after every sip, even when nothing was left to mix. It was ordinary, painfully ordinary, but I remember thinking, this feels dangerous. When she stood to leave, she hesitated, hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. "This stays between us," she said softly, almost like she was asking, almost like she already knew the answer. And then she was gone, leaving her half-empty cup on the table, steam curling upward like something unfinished. I stared at it until it stopped rising. That was the moment I knew my days wouldn't go back to the way they were. It didn't take long for the accidental meetings to stop feeling accidental. I told myself I just happened to go to the coffee shop earlier than usual, or that I just happened to pick the seat by the window where the light fell softer. But she always found me. Or maybe I always let myself be found. One afternoon, the place was half empty, the rain outside smearing the windows into blurry streaks. She slid her umbrella closed and set it by the chair across from me, shaking her hair lightly before sitting down. "You're here a lot," she said, teasing, though not unkindly. I shrugged. "You're here too." That made her smile, and she leaned back, cradling her cup in both hands. Her bracelets clinked faintly. For a while, neither of us spoke, just listening to the soft hiss of rain and the low hum of a song the barista hadn't bothered to change in hours. She was the first to break the quiet. "I used to come here with my husband," she said, almost like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. "Years ago. He hated the coffee, but he liked watching the people." I looked at her, waiting, but she kept her eyes on the window. I caught the faintest curve of her lips, but it wasn't a smile. It was something else, some shadow of remembering. You don't anymore? I asked. She shook her head, quick and small. Divorced. 5 years now. It was said lightly, like a fact, but the air shifted between us. I didn't press. She didn't add more. The truth settled in me differently than I expected. She wasn't untouchable anymore. Not in the way I'd kept her in some mental frame labeled off limits. She wasn't just my friend's mom, the grown-up in the room, the permanent adult. She was someone who sat alone in a coffee shop, stirring her drink long after the sugar was gone. And yet, that was exactly why it felt dangerous. Later that week, she called out to me in the hallway of our building. I just returned from class, arms full of groceries, keys dangling uselessly from my mouth. She laughed softly, then offered to hold the bag slipping from my elbow. You'll break your back carrying everything at once, she said, following me to my door. Her presence in the apartment felt strange at first, too intimate. She set the bag down on the counter and, without asking, began unpacking items, bread, apples, instant noodles, like she'd done it 100 times before. Your fridge looks like a college dorm, she remarked, sliding the apples neatly into the drawer. I grinned. That's because it is. The joke hung there, and she laughed, a real laugh this time, unguarded. I watched her fingers as she tucked away the last item, slow and precise, as though organizing my small chaos was a kind of relief. We sat at the table after, mugs of tea between us. She wrapped her hands around hers, though the cup was already cooling. I noticed the way she avoided eye contact when she asked me about school, about my plans. Still figuring it out, I admitted. Some days I think I'll get it together. Other days, I trailed off. She looked at me then, really looked. You're young. That's allowed. The words were simple, but something in her tone made me pause. It wasn't the cliché encouragement people my age usually got. It was layered, almost wistful, like she was speaking to herself as much as to me. We sat there for a long time without filling the silence. And it wasn't empty. It was full of something unnamed, something that hummed between the scrape of a chair leg and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I should have said goodnight. I should have thanked her and opened the door. But instead, I found myself tracing the rim of my cup with my thumb, waiting for her to say something else. When she finally stood, she brushed past me to reach for her coat. Her hand grazed my shoulder. Light, casual, nothing anyone else would notice. But it stopped me cold. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Or maybe because I knew I'd spend the rest of the night replaying the weight of that touch, over and over, like it meant more than either of us was willing to admit. She'd asked me to help carry a box up from her car. Old books she was donating. The rain had started again, light but steady, dripping down the awning as we hauled the box inside. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender and something warm, like baked bread that had long since cooled. We set the box down by the couch. She brushed her hair back, damp strands sticking to her cheek, and I almost reached for them. Almost. Instead, I sat down and caught my breath. She poured us tea without asking. We didn't talk much at first, just the scrape of cups, the rain against the window. Her living room felt too quiet, too personal, the framed photos on the shelf, her son in one of them. My friend. I stared at that picture a beat too long. She noticed. He doesn't visit much anymore, she said softly, settling into the armchair across from me. Busy with work. Busy with life. I nodded. My throat felt dry. The steam from the tea curled between us, carrying the weight of things unsaid. The silence stretched. I fiddled with the edge of a coaster, tracing the ring left behind from her cup. She watched me, eyes steady, unreadable. And then, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. She glanced at it quickly, then flipped it face down. Everything okay? I asked. She smiled, but it was tight. It's fine. But it wasn't. The air thickened. The knock came just after. A neighbor dropping off a package left at their door. She stood, thanking them politely, but when she turned back, I saw it. the shift. The sudden awareness that we weren't alone in the world, that what we were doing, even if it was nothing, looked like something. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine when she sat down again. I should probably head out, I said finally, though I didn't move. She gave a small nod, her hands folded in her lap, fingers twisting together like she was working through the same thought. The room pulsed with hesitation. I could feel it in the space between us, in the way my leg bounced restlessly, in the way she smoothed her sleeve over and over. I wanted to say something, to ask, to name the current pulling us both under. But the words stayed lodged in my chest. When I finally stood, she walked me to the door. Too close. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume, warm and steady beneath the rain-damp air. My hand lifted, almost on its own, brushing lightly against her arm as I reached for the doorknob. She froze, not pulling away, not moving closer. Just there. The air between us cracked, waiting. For a second, just a second, I thought I might close the gap. Thought she might let me. But then she whispered, barely audible, "You should go." So I did. And the door closed softly behind me, leaving the echo of everything we hadn't said. That it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no big revelations. Just a walk. Just the two of us, side by side on a late afternoon when the air was sharp with the smell of cut grass and distant rain. She'd asked if I wanted to join her. Something casual, a loop around the block, stretch the legs. I said yes too quickly. At first, we talked about nothing. The weather turning, the bookstore finally closing down, the streetlight that had been broken for weeks. Small things. Safe things. Our steps fell into rhythm, almost unconsciously, like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. But I kept stealing glances. The way her hands stayed tucked into her jacket pockets, shoulders slightly hunched as if she was bracing against more than just the wind. She caught me looking once, and instead of glancing away, she held my gaze for a beat too long. Then she smiled faintly, as if to say I noticed, but I won't say anything. We reached a small park bench and sat. The quiet pressed in, kids playing in the distance, a dog barking somewhere, but between us, only silence. I fiddled with the zipper of my jacket. She traced a pattern into the condensation of her water bottle, not drinking. Finally, she said, "You spend a lot of time alone." I blinked, surprised. "You noticed?" Her mouth twitched. "Hard not to. You keep to yourself. Always polite, always careful." That word again. Careful. I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. When I did speak, my voice came out lower than I meant. It's easier that way. Less complicated. Her hand stilled on the bottle. For a long second, she didn't move. Sometimes complicated is where life actually happens. The words landed heavier than I expected. My pulse quickened. I wanted to ask her what she meant. If she meant this. Us. But I didn't. Instead, I picked at the seam of the bench, nails dragging over old splinters. And then, out of nowhere, she sighed, leaning back. "Do you know how strange it feels, talking like this with you?" I turned toward her. "Strange how?" She gave a small laugh, more breath than sound. "Because you're my son's friend. Because you're—" She stopped herself, shook her head. "Never mind." Her voice cracked faintly on that last word. My stomach flipped. I should have left it there. Let the silence swallow it. But something broke loose in me. "I think about you," I said quietly. Too quietly. Her head snapped toward me. Eyes searching, unreadable. I panicked, backpedaled. "Not like, I just mean. I notice things. I can't not." Her lips parted, but no words came. She stared at me, and I stared at the ground, heat crawling up my neck. The world felt louder. The rustle of leaves, the thud of a jogger's shoes on the path, the beating in my ears. Finally, she spoke. "You shouldn't say things like that." I know, and I meant it, but I also knew I'd never take it back. She exhaled, slow, shaky, then leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped like she was holding herself together. "Do you ever wonder," she whispered, "if some lines aren't as solid as they look?" The question hung there. Fragile. Exposed. I turned to her fully. My knee brushed against hers. She didn't move away. For a moment, the park, the people, the world, all of it blurred. I thought, this is it. This is where everything changes. But she didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, like staring too directly at me would make it real. And in that suspended moment, with her words still trembling in the air, I realized we were both asking the same unspoken thing. Are we about to cross it? After that walk, I thought everything would tilt forward, like we were leaning towards something inevitable. But instead, she shifted. She stopped showing up at the coffee shop. The mornings stretched empty, my usual corner seat holding nothing but the sound of the espresso machine and the flick of pages I couldn't concentrate on. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. People get busy. Errands pile up. Schedules change. But then it became impossible to ignore. The seat across from me stayed vacant. When I saw her in the hallway a week later, she smiled politely, too politely, like we'd never sat on that park bench with words trembling between us. She asked how school was, but didn't wait for the answer. She carried her grocery bags in both hands like a shield, vanished behind her door, and that was it. Something had changed. I felt it in the silence she left behind. The truth came in fragments. A voicemail I overheard when I passed her open door. Her voice low, careful. No, I don't think it's a good idea. He doesn't need to know yet. Another day, I spotted a photo frame on her entryway table, one I hadn't noticed before. A younger man in it. Her ex-husband, I guessed. Or maybe not ex. The thought twisted in me. I told myself I wouldn't care, that it wasn't my place. But I caught myself waiting, outside her door, in the lobby, at the coffee shop, always waiting for her to appear like she used to. And when she didn't, I started pulling away too, skipping the mornings, choosing different routes, trying to outdistance whatever this was. But the truth? The distance didn't free me. It only sharpened the ache. One night, I nearly knocked on her door. I stood there, palm raised, knuckles almost touching the wood. Her light was on, a faint shadow moving across the window. I imagined her inside, sitting with a book, tea cooling on the table, pretending the silence didn't weigh on her the same way it did on me. My hand stayed lifted, then lowered. The next day, I tried to send a message. Just a simple one. Are you okay? I typed it, deleted it, typed it again, watched the cursor blink, impatient, as if it knew I was lying to myself. In the end, I didn't send it. She wasn't gone. Not completely. I'd catch glimpses, her car pulling out of the lot, her figure walking briskly down the street, hair pulled back tighter than usual, eyes fixed anywhere but mine. Every time, I felt the same mix of relief and frustration. Relieved she was still there. Frustrated at how far away she seemed even when she was 10 steps from me. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Like we'd been building toward a word that never came, and now I was stuck in the silence after. The coffee shop kept its rhythm without her. The seat across from me stayed empty. I folded napkins into crooked triangles and stared at the steam curling from my cup, half hoping she'd walk in, half hoping she never would. And the strangest part? I couldn't decide which would hurt more. It happened in the most ordinary place, the hallway outside our doors. I just returned from class, shoulders stiff from carrying too many books I didn't really read. She was there, kneeling to pick up a dropped bag of groceries, apples rolling across the worn carpet. We both reached for the same one. Our hands brushed, and for the first time in weeks, neither of us pulled away. Thanks, she said softly, fingers closing around the apple. She straightened, adjusting her coat, but her movements felt slower, like she wasn't rushing to escape this time. The silence stretched, too heavy to leave unbroken. So I said it, the thing that had been lodged in my throat since that park bench. I thought I did something wrong. Her eyes flicked up, startled. Why would you think that? You stopped coming by. You barely look at me anymore. My voice cracked in a way that embarrassed me, but I didn't care. It felt like you were gone. She sighed, leaning back against her door. For a moment, she didn't look like the composed woman I'd always seen. She looked tired, vulnerable. You didn't do anything wrong, she said. That's the problem. The words cut through me. I waited, but she didn't continue. Just stared at the floor like the pattern of the carpet was easier to face than me. Finally, she added, I told myself I had to stop. Because every time I sat across from you, every time you looked at me like that, she trailed off, shaking her head. It scared me. I swallowed hard. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag. Scared you how? She met my eyes then. Really met them. Because I wanted it too. The air between us shifted. The hallway seemed smaller, the walls pressing closer. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. All the nights replayed in my head. The empty coffee shop chair, the text unsent, the door I almost knocked on. And now here it was, plain and fragile, hanging in the air between us. I stepped closer. Not much. Just enough that the warmth of her presence brushed against me. You think I don't know this is complicated? I whispered. That I haven't tried to stop myself 100 times? Her lips parted, but no words came. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the push and pull, the guilt and the longing. Then, quietly, almost like she was confessing to herself, I can't promise you anything. The honesty stung, but it also steadied me. I'm not asking you to, I said. We stood there, so close, yet still on opposite sides of a line neither of us had dared cross. My pulse thundered, but my voice stayed low. I just don't want to keep pretending. She let out a shaky laugh. You're too young to be this serious. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what I want. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And then they were there, undeniable. Her hand lifted slightly, like she was about to touch me. Then she hesitated, fingers hovering midair. I held still, waiting, not pushing. Finally, she let her hand fall against mine, the lightest touch. Barely there, but it was enough. Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, once soft, like a question neither of us wanted to answer aloud. We both smiled then, small, tired, almost sad smiles. But real. Okay, she whispered. And that was it. No kiss. No promises. Just her hand in mine, warm and trembling, and the word that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Time didn't stop after that night in the hallway. Life kept on. Groceries, laundry, the buzz of phones, mornings that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. But something had shifted. Not in fireworks, not in declarations. Just in the way we allowed ourselves to exist in the same spaces again. She came back to the coffee shop first. A Tuesday, 8:47 a.m. I remember because I was already there, nursing a black coffee gone lukewarm, folding my napkin into a crooked triangle. When she walked in, she hesitated, scanning the room like she wasn't sure if this was a mistake. Then her eyes found me. She sat down without a word, sliding her cup onto the table. Steam curled between us, soft and familiar. No apologies. No explanations. Just that quiet return. From then on, it wasn't every day. Some mornings she came, some she didn't. But when she did, it felt natural again. Her bracelets clinking faintly when she stirred her coffee, me pretending to study, both of us knowing better. We didn't fill the silence anymore. We let it be what it was. Comfortable. One Saturday, we walked again, circling the same park path where everything had almost unraveled. We sat on the same bench. This time, there was no breaking point, no confession held too long. Just the easy rhythm of being beside each other, letting the air do most of the talking. She rested her hand lightly over mine. Not hidden, not rushed. Just there. I didn't need her to explain. And she didn't. Months slipped past. Routines shifted in ways too small to notice unless you were inside them. I started leaving an extra mug out when I brewed tea. She began keeping a packet of sugar in her cupboard, just for me. Sometimes she'd tease me about how long I let my coffee sit before drinking it. I'd tease her back for stirring after every sip, even when nothing was left to stir. Little habits, layered until they became something that felt like ours. It wasn't perfect. There were still pauses, moments where the weight of what we were doing pressed in. Once, She caught sight of an old photograph and grew quiet for the rest of the evening. Another time, I hesitated before introducing her to a classmate who asked too casually, "Is this your mom?" But the pauses didn't undo us. They just reminded us what it cost to keep going. And strangely, that made it feel more real. I think of one morning most. The rain was light, the window glass blurred just enough to turn the street outside into a watercolor. She was reading, her hair tied back loosely, a half-empty mug of tea forgotten on the table. I was pretending to study again, eyes drifting more than focusing. She looked up, caught me staring, and instead of laughing or deflecting, she just held my gaze. No words, just the quiet understanding that this was where we'd landed. Together. Looking back, I don't remember the exact moment when everything stopped feeling like waiting. Maybe it was that hand on mine at the bench. Maybe it was the way she remembered to ask if I'd eaten dinner. Maybe it was the morning she finally let herself say, "Stay a little longer." What I do know is this: life didn't explode. It settled into warmth, into quiet routines that mattered more than we ever admitted out loud. And when I think of her now, I don't think of the first time in the coffee shop or even the night in the hallway. I think of something simpler, her thumb brushing over my knuckles, her voice whispering, "Okay," because that was the word that changed everything.